Steven Spielberg for showing us.
Friends who have won this before.
Steven Spielberg isn't just a filmmaker. He's basically the guy who invented the blockbuster. Born in 1946, he grew up obsessed with cameras and somehow turned childhood hobbies into a career that reshaped Hollywood. From sharks to aliens, Nazis to dinosaurs, his imagination has filled theaters for decades. But behind the box office glory are some truly bizarre stories. Here are 20 weird facts you probably didn't know about Steven Spielberg. Before he was wrangling T-Rexes, Spielberg was staging train wrecks in his living room. As a kid, he loved smashing his Lionel toy trains together and filming the crashes with an 8mm camera. His parents worried he was breaking toys, but Steven swore he was just directing. That obsession with scale, destruction, and perspective later inspired some of his greatest set pieces. Think about the chaos in Indiana Jones or Jurassic Park. It all started with toy locomotives derailing on his carpet. Spielberg later said he realized at age 12 that movies let him control disaster without anyone actually getting hurt. His early productions may have been tiny, but they showed the seeds of a future blockbuster king. What's wild is that most kids just break toys and move on. Spielberg turned it into a career blueprint. Even back then, he was directing destiny. You'd think the most famous director in the world was born with a Hollywood pass. Nope. When Spielberg applied to USC's prestigious film school, they rejected him, not once, but twice. His grades weren't strong, and admissions thought he lacked the academic polish they wanted. Imagine being the admissions officer who said nah to Steven Spielberg. He eventually studied English at Cal State Long Beach while sneaking onto studio lots to learn filmmaking firsthand. Instead of quitting, he hustled his way into TV directing gigs, proving you don't need film school to become a legend. Today, USC proudly claims Spielberg as an honorary alum, which is hilarious, given they slammed the door in his face. Rejection didn't stop him, it fueled him. It's a reminder for every creative dreamer out there. Sometimes the gatekeepers don't know greatness even when it's knocking. Spielberg literally conned his way into Hollywood. As a teenager, he bought a fake studio pass, dressed in a suit, and wandered onto the Universal lot like he belonged there. He claimed an empty office, put his name on the door, and started chatting up producers as if he was staff. No one stopped him, he looked confident, and that was enough. He spent weeks shadowing editors, watching dailies, and learning the business from the inside. It sounds insane, but it worked. He turned that hustle into his first TV directing opportunities, which led to film offers. Think about it. The man who gave us E.T. and Schindler's List got his start by trespassing in a suit. So here's the question. Would you have the guts to sneak onto a studio lot today? Drop your answer in the comments. And if Spielberg's hustle inspires you, smash that like button right now. Before The Sharks and Aliens, Spielberg's first feature-length film was actually for television. In 1971, he directed Duel, a thriller about a driver being hunted by a mysterious trucker. Shot in just 13 days on a tiny budget, it became a cult hit. The suspense, camera angles, and pacing felt cinematic, and critics immediately recognized Spielberg's gift for tension. The movie was later expanded for theatrical release, turning his TV break into his Hollywood calling card. What's weird is how simple the premise was, a guy in a car chased by a truck, but Spielberg made it terrifying. Duel proved you don't need special effects or big stars to grip an audience. Sometimes one man, one road, and one psychotic truck driver are enough. The film caught the eye of Universal execs and opened the door to bigger projects. Not bad for what started as just a TV movie. Jaws, 1975, is credited with creating the modern blockbuster, but behind the scenes, it was nearly a career killer. The mechanical shark, nicknamed Bruce, constantly malfunctioned, forcing Spielberg to improvise. Instead of showing the shark, he used music, camera angles, and splashes to build terror. The production ran way over budget and schedule, and Spielberg thought he'd be fired. He even skipped the premiere out of fear it would flop. Instead, it became the highest-grossing film in history at the time. What's wild is that all the problems, the broken shark, the delays, are what made the movie brilliant. Audiences imagined the monster instead of seeing it, which was scarier. Spielberg turned disaster into triumph, proving sometimes the mistakes make the masterpiece. He went from the kid who might get fired to the guy who changed movies forever in one summer. In college, Spielberg directed a 26-minute short called Amblin, 1968. It was about a young man and woman hitchhiking across the desert, and it cost just $15,000. The film was so polished that Universal signed him to a 7-year contract, the youngest director in studio history at just 22. Amblin was also where Spielberg first experimented with music-driven storytelling, something that later defined his career. He eventually named his production company Amblin Entertainment after it. Not bad for a student film that most people thought would fade into obscurity. Spielberg himself joked that he barely graduated college, but that short was his diploma. What's crazy is that he wasn't even a film major when he made it, just a hungry kid with a camera and ambition. That one film put him on the Hollywood map, showing that sometimes you only need one shot to make it big. In the mid-1970s, Spielberg's dream was to direct a James Bond film. He pitched himself to the producers, but they turned him down, saying he wasn't experienced enough. Talk about a missed opportunity. Spielberg was crushed, but then George Lucas called him with an idea for a new kind of hero, Indiana Jones. Together, they created Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981, which became a global phenomenon. Spielberg later joked that he didn't get James Bond, but he got the American version with a whip and a fedora. The irony? Years later, Indiana Jones became so iconic that even Bond films took inspiration from it. Sometimes rejection is just the universe saying, hold on, we've got something better. And in this case, better meant one of the most beloved adventure franchises of all time. James Bond may sip martinis, but Indy drinks adventure straight from the source. When Spielberg made Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, he poured everything into it, so much that he gave up his salary in exchange for creative control and profit participation. That was a massive gamble. During production, the budget ballooned, and Spielberg admitted he nearly went broke. He lived modestly while putting every dollar back into the film. Luckily, it paid off. The movie grossed nearly $300 million worldwide and cemented him as Hollywood's new Wonder Boy. What's weird is that Spielberg based much of the film on childhood memories of watching meteor showers and looking for UFOs. That sense of childlike wonder became the emotional core of the movie. It was both science fiction and autobiography. If Jaws made him the king of thrillers, Close Encounters made him the prophet of awe, and all it took was some mashed potatoes and a really big spaceship. The look of Indiana Jones, fedora, whip, leather jacket wasn't random. Spielberg and Lucas borrowed heavily from the 1930s adventure serials they loved as kids. The whip came from cowboy heroes, the hat from pulp explorers, and the jacket from military surplus. Harrison Ford added his own swagger, but the costume was designed to look instantly iconic, like something out of a childhood Saturday matinee. Audiences loved it, and Indy's silhouette became as famous as Superman's cape. The hat was so important that Spielberg even made rules. Indy can lose his gun, his bag, even his dignity, but never the hat. Fans still debate whether the whip or the fedora is more iconic. So let's settle it right here. What's the true Indy trademark, the whip or the hat? Drop your answer below, and while you're at it, smash that like button if you'd follow Indy into a temple full of booby traps. E.T. 1982 wasn't just a cute alien story. It was Spielberg working through his parents' divorce. He imagined a lonely boy who finds comfort in a strange but loyal friend. Spielberg once said, E.T. was the imaginary friend I never had. That's why the film feels so personal. It's about childhood, loneliness, and the longing for connection. Even the glowing heart was symbolic, representing the warmth of love in the face of separation. What's weird is that E.T. was originally conceived as a horror film called Night Skies, about aliens terrorizing a family. Spielberg flipped the idea into something gentle and magical instead, and the result was the highest-grossing movie of the 80s until Jurassic Park. E.T. Phoning Home wasn't just about aliens. It was about Spielberg wishing his fractured family could come back together. Sometimes the scariest ideas become the most heartwarming stories. Here's one of Hollywood's strangest controversies. Who really directed Poltergeist, 1982? Officially, Tobe Hooper was credited as the director, with Spielberg producing. But cast and crew have long claimed Spielberg was heavily involved, even calling many of the shots. Spielberg himself admitted he was on set nearly every day, guiding the film because it was shooting at the same time as E.T. Some critics argue it has Spielberg's fingerprints all over it: family drama, suburban setting, supernatural wonder. Whether or not he was the secret director, Poltergeist became a classic, with scenes like the clown doll and the TV static still haunting audiences today. Spielberg always maintained Hooper deserved credit, but fans keep debating it. Maybe that's the real ghost story here, the mystery of who was really behind one of the most terrifying suburban nightmares of the 1980s. Before Jaws, 1975, summer was considered a dead zone for movies. Studios saved their prestige films for fall and winter, but Spielberg's shark thriller changed everything. It opened in June, packed theaters all summer, and proved audiences wanted big spectacle during vacation months. The term summer blockbuster was born, and suddenly every studio was chasing the formula. Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Independence Day, they all owe their release timing to Jaws. What's funny is that Spielberg himself didn't plan it that way. The delays caused by the malfunctioning shark pushed the film into a summer release. What looked like disaster became destiny. Today, the summer box office is a battleground for superheroes and sequels, and it all started with a plastic shark that wouldn't work. Spielberg didn't just make a hit movie, he reprogrammed Hollywood's calendar forever. In the early 80s, Spielberg released two films back-to-back that freaked out parents: Indiana Jones and The Temple of Doom and Gremlins, which he produced. They were too intense for kids, but not violent enough for an R rating. Audiences complained there was no middle ground. Spielberg suggested the MPAA create a new rating, PG-13, for films that were edgier than family fare, but not adult-only. The board agreed, and the first PG-13 film was Red Dawn, 1984. Spielberg basically reshaped how movies are rated just, because kids were traumatized by monkey brains and killer puppets. Today, PG-13 dominates the box office, and it all traces back to Spielberg pushing boundaries. Without him, half the superhero movies you love wouldn't exist in their current form. Sometimes changing the rules isn't about art, it's about making sure kids don't get nightmares from dinner scenes. Here's a fun one. When Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind were in production, George Lucas visited Spielberg on set. Lucas was so nervous about Star Wars failing that he offered Spielberg a bet. They'd trade points on each other's movies. Spielberg agreed, and to this day, he still earns a small percentage of Star Wars profits. Talk about a friendship paying dividends. Lucas got comfort, Spielberg got cash, and fans got two sci-fi classics. It's one of the strangest Hollywood deals ever, and proof these guys weren't just rivals, they were allies. So, let's imagine, if you could own a percentage of any movie franchise, which one would you choose? Drop your fantasy pick in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more wild behind-the-scenes stories. In 1983, Spielberg directed one of the 4 segments in Twilight Zone, the movie. His piece, Kick the Can, was about elderly people becoming young again after playing a magical game. It wasn't as scary as the other segments, and critics said it felt overly sentimental. But Spielberg admitted he wanted to tell a hopeful story in the middle of darker material. The film itself was overshadowed by tragedy after a helicopter accident killed actor Vic Morrow and 2 children during another director's segment. Spielberg was shaken by the incident and distanced himself from anthology projects afterward. Still, Kick the Can reflected his softer side, reminding audiences that Spielberg wasn't just about thrills and chills, he also cared about childlike wonder. Even in horror anthologies, Spielberg found a way to sprinkle a little fairy dust. Long before Raiders, Spielberg was toying with making his own spy franchise. He considered adapting the French comic Tintin or inventing a Bond-style American agent. But when George Lucas pitched Indiana Jones, Spielberg dropped everything to join forces. Funny enough, decades later, Spielberg finally did get to direct The Adventures of Tintin, 2011, a CGI motion capture adventure. It felt like coming full circle, a childhood dream realized through modern technology. Spielberg admitted Tintin's globe-trotting, clue-chasing style had always appealed to him, and Indy was just his first way of scratching that itch. The idea that one rejection, Bond, and one childhood fantasy, Tintin, indirectly birthed Indiana Jones shows how creative paths zigzag. Sometimes the projects you don't get lead to the ones you're destined for, and in Spielberg's case, destiny wore a fedora and carried a whip. In 1985, Spielberg directed The Color Purple, adapting Alice Walker's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel. Many doubted whether a white director could do justice to such a story, but Spielberg's passion for the material convinced the studio. He took a huge gamble casting comedian Whoopi Goldberg, who had no major film credits, as Celie. The result was stunning. Goldberg earned an Oscar nomination, and the film became a critical and box office success. Oprah Winfrey also made her film debut in it, proving Spielberg's instincts were spot on. The project showed he wasn't just the king of blockbusters, he could handle intimate, emotional drama too. It expanded his reputation beyond spectacle and gave Hollywood 2 new stars. Spielberg later said The Color Purple was one of the most important films of his career. For a director known for dinosaurs and aliens, he also proved he could tell deeply human stories. Before 1993, dinosaurs on film looked like clay models or stiff animatronics. Then Spielberg unleashed Jurassic Park. He combined groundbreaking CGI with Stan Winston's animatronics to create creatures that looked terrifyingly real. Audiences had never seen anything like it. The T-Rex attack in the rain is still considered one of the greatest sequences in cinema history. What's crazy is that Spielberg originally planned to use stop-motion animation until a team of young ILM animators showed him test footage of a CGI dino. Spielberg instantly pivoted, reshaping the future of effects. The movie grossed over $1 billion and sparked a global dinosaur craze. Kids begged for toys, paleontology enrollment spiked, and studios scrambled to embrace CGI. Spielberg didn't just make dinosaurs roar, he changed visual effects forever. Jurassic Park wasn't just a movie, it was a moment in history when imagination finally caught up to technology. By the mid-1990s, Spielberg was tired of just working within Hollywood's system, so he built his own. In 1994, he co-founded DreamWorks SKG with Jeffrey Katzenberg and David Geffen. Their goal was to create a studio driven by creators, not just money men. DreamWorks produced hits like Saving Private Ryan, Gladiator, and Shrek. It also became a leader in animation, rivaling Disney and Pixar. What's weird is that Spielberg basically went from sneaking onto studio lots as a kid to running his own empire. DreamWorks was his way of giving directors and animators freedom he never had early in his career. And while the company eventually merged with bigger studios, its legacy is undeniable. From ogres to war epics, Spielberg's fingerprints are all over it. It proved he wasn't just a director, he was a mogul, shaping Hollywood's next era. Even in the age of digital everything, Spielberg is surprisingly old-fashioned. He still prefers shooting on film stock, cutting on physical editing machines when he can, and storyboarding by hand. On Ready Player One, 2018, which was full of CGI, Spielberg admitted he treated it like an old-school animated film, sketching ideas frame by frame. He also refuses to embrace too much green screen, preferring practical sets and effects wherever possible. What's weird is that one of the most technologically influential directors of all time still clings to analog methods. For Spielberg, storytelling comes first. Gadgets are just tools. Maybe that's why his movies feel timeless. They blend classic craft with just enough innovation. At nearly 80 years old, Spielberg hasn't stopped directing, proving the kid with toy trains is still behind the camera, just with slightly bigger toys. Conclusion. And there you have it, 20 weird, wild facts about Steven Spielberg. From sneaking onto the Universal lot to redefining entire genres, Spielberg has done it all. He didn't just direct blockbusters, he invented them. He didn't just entertain, he reshaped Hollywood's rules. Whether it's a shark, an alien, a whip-cracking archaeologist, or a T-Rex roaring in the rain, Spielberg knows how to turn wonder into cinema. Which Spielberg moment is your favorite? Drop it in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into the legends who built Hollywood.